History remembers Rome. It remembers the Mongols. But one empire, powerful enough to shape Europe. This empire stood between East and West, controlling the gateway of an entire continent. Yet despite its immense power, most history books barely mention its name. To uncover their story, we must journey across the endless grasslands of Eurasia. Here, survival belonged only to those strong enough to outride every enemy.
Among countless tribes, one would soon rewrite the history of Europe.
Their rise began after another great empire collapsed, leaving a dangerous vacuum of power. The Khazars seized that moment, building one of the strongest kingdoms of the medieval world. Their cities flourished, their armies expanded, their merchants grew unimaginably wealthy. Then the Khazars made a choice unlike any empire before them, a decision that still divides historians today.
Long before the Khazars ruled the steppe, another mighty empire dominated these endless plains. That empire was the Göktürk Khaganate, the first great Turkic superpower stretching across Central Asia.
But power rarely lasts forever. Civil war and internal divisions began tearing the empire apart.
As old rulers weakened, ambitious tribes prepared to seize their chance.
Among those tribes, one name would soon reshape the medieval world. No one knows exactly where the Khazars first came from, and that mystery still divides historians today. Most scholars believe they emerged from the Turkic world, but their exact beginnings remain uncertain. The steppe was more than empty land. It was the highway of empires. Whoever controlled these plains controlled the movement of armies, merchants, and ideas. The Khazars understood this better than anyone, and they were about to build an empire unlike any the world had seen. As rival tribes fought for survival, the Khazars saw something others failed to recognize: opportunity. Their greatest strength wasn't numbers, it was organization. Their greatest strength wasn't numbers, it was organization. Every warrior carried the speed of the steppe and the precision of years of training. Within a generation, Khazar influence spread across rivers, mountains, and trade routes. Gold poured into their treasury, not only through war, but through commerce. But conquering land wasn't enough. Whoever controlled trade controlled wealth.
The Khazars positioned themselves at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, collecting taxes instead of endless victories. Soon, emperors and caliphs could no longer ignore the growing power of the Khazars.
Yet the Khazars faced a dangerous problem. Two expanding superpowers were closing in from opposite directions. By the early 7th century, the Khazars stood between two civilizations. Neither trusted them, yet both needed them.
To the west stood Byzantium, one of the richest and most sophisticated empires on earth.
The Byzantine emperors understood one fact: a strong Khazar kingdom could protect their northern frontier. Instead of immediate war, diplomacy became the first weapon. The alliance grew so important that it was strengthened through a royal marriage. Together, they formed a powerful barrier against the expanding forces of the south. But peace on the frontier would not last. A new power was advancing with unstoppable momentum. The rapidly expanding Arab Caliphate had begun transforming the political map of the Middle East. Soon, the Caucasus would become the battlefield where three great powers collided.
The greatest conflict in Khazar history was about to begin, and it would decide the fate of an empire. The Arab armies marched north through the Caucasus, determined to break the Khazar frontier. Every mountain pass became a gateway, and every fortress became a battlefield.
The first clashes were fierce. Neither side was willing to surrender the frontier.
The Khazars relied on speed, mobility, and devastating mounted archers to outmaneuver their enemies.
The mountains themselves became weapons, slowing armies and stretching supply lines.
Year after year, the war continued, consuming lives, treasure, and entire generations. Against overwhelming odds, the Khazars repeatedly forced powerful armies to retreat. Their victories reshaped the balance of power across the Caucasus and echoed far beyond the battlefield.
War had protected the empire, but lasting power would come from something even more valuable.
The Khazars had proven they could survive war. Now they would discover that trade could build an even greater empire.
The Khazars discovered a truth that many conquerors never understood. Controlling trade could be more powerful than conquering kingdoms.
From Scandinavia to Central Asia, merchants crossed Khazar territory carrying priceless goods.
Silk from China, silver from the Islamic world, furs from the north, all passed through Khazar lands.
Instead of taking everything by force, the Khazars collected taxes from merchants crossing their borders. Every caravan strengthened the empire. Every transaction filled the royal treasury. Their capital, Itil, became one of the busiest commercial cities in the region. People of different cultures, languages, and beliefs traded side by side under Khazar protection.
Diplomats, traders, and travelers carried more than goods. They carried ideas, technology, and influence.
Yet one decision inside the royal court would become the greatest mystery of the Khazar Empire.
Why would the rulers of a rising superpower embrace a path unlike any other empire of their time?
Power had brought the Khazars wealth, but now they faced a decision that gold could never solve.
The empire stood between two great religious worlds, Christianity to the west and Islam to the south.
According to several medieval sources, religious scholars were invited to the Khazar court for debate.
History does not preserve every word they spoke, but it remembers that the debate became legendary.
Many historians believe the Khazar ruling elite eventually adopted Judaism, though the details remain debated.
Why they made this choice remains one of the greatest unanswered questions in medieval history. Some scholars argue it strengthened Khazar independence by avoiding complete alignment with either neighboring superpower. Others believe the full story may never be known because so many original records have disappeared. Whatever the reason, the Khazars became one of history's most remarkable multicultural empires. But while the empire reached the height of its prosperity, a powerful enemy was already preparing to destroy it. At its peak, the Khazar Empire became one of the wealthiest crossroads in the medieval world. Merchants traveled thousands of miles because the safest roads often passed through Khazar lands. Silk, silver, honey, wax, spices, and furs flowed through the empire every single day. The Khazars protected commerce because prosperity depended on stability, not endless conquest. Visitors described cities filled with different languages, customs, and cultures living side by side.
The Khazar rulers balanced diplomacy as carefully as they balanced trade.
But no empire remains powerful forever, and new rivals were already watching from the north. The rising power of the Rus would soon challenge Khazar control of the great rivers.
The trade routes that had created immense wealth were becoming the empire's greatest vulnerability.
The empire had reached its greatest height, but history was about to test its greatest weakness.
Every empire has a turning point. For the Khazars, it arrived quietly before anyone realized the danger.
Far to the north, a new power was growing stronger with every passing year.
The rivers that carried trade also carried armies, and the Rus knew exactly where they led.
Control of commerce had made the Khazars wealthy. Now it made them a target. Raids became more frequent, each one testing the empire's defenses.
The Khazars still possessed experienced warriors, but their borders had become too vast to defend completely.
History often shows that great empires fall not from a single battle, but from years of growing pressure.
The Khagan faced impossible choices: defend the borders, protect the trade routes, or preserve the capital.
The empire had survived Arabs, rival tribes, and political storms. But this challenge was different. In the 960s, the storm finally arrived. Prince Sviatoslav of Kyiv marched south with... The first target was Sarkel, one of the Khazars' strongest frontier fortresses. The assault was relentless. Arrows darkened the sky, while siege forces pressed forward.
After fierce fighting, Sarkel fell, opening the road deeper into Khazar territory.
One victory quickly became another. The Khazar defenses began to crumble under constant pressure. At the heart of the empire stood Itil, a city built on trade, diplomacy, and centuries of ambition.
Historical sources suggest Itil was devastated during the campaign, though the exact details remain uncertain.
The empire that had controlled trade across continents was disappearing before the eyes of history.
Some Khazar communities survived for generations, but the empire itself would never recover.
But even after its fall, the greatest mystery of the Khazars had only just begun. Empires usually leave behind monuments. The Khadintelias, the Khazars, left behind questions.
Unlike Rome or Byzantium, very few Khazar buildings survived the passage of time.
What we know today comes from scattered archaeological finds and accounts written by neighboring civilizations.
Many details remained uncertain because the Khazars left very few surviving written records of their own.
This silence gave birth to countless theories, some supported by evidence, others driven by speculation.
Responsible historians separate documented evidence from stories that cannot yet be proven. And
even today, new discoveries continue to reshape our understanding of the Khazar world.
Every coin, every fortress, and every forgotten settlement adds another piece to the puzzle. Perhaps the Khazars teach us that history is not only about what survives, but also about what is lost. But one final question remains. What can the rise and fall of the Khazars teach us today?
The Khazars ruled vast lands, shaped international trade, and influenced the course of medieval history. Yet today, few people even know their name.
History doesn't always remember the most powerful empires. It remembers the ones whose stories survive. The Khazar story reminds us that power alone can never guarantee immortality.
Trade created prosperity, Diplomacy created stability. But no empire escapes the test of time. Every forgotten civilization holds lessons that still matter today if we choose to study them. Across the Eurasian steppe, traces of the Khazars still wait to be discovered. And perhaps, somewhere beneath those fields, another piece of their story is still waiting to be found. Which forgotten empire should we uncover next? Tell us your choice in the comments below. At Histropia, every forgotten empire has a story worth remembering. Next time, we journey into another forgotten civilization whose rise changed history before disappearing into legend.